Hi, this is Mark Debian, and we're going to walk through how we do remote PI planning using Targetprocess. So in a traditional PI planning, we'd be in a big room here like this, but for this session here, we're going to walk through how you can do all of this remotely using video tools like Zoom or Google Meet. You can also use the interactive tools that we have and some of the other integrations that we'll be walking through today. So we're going to start at a high level, looking at our portfolio budgeting and the value that we have that we can do from a costing or a budgeting perspective. Once we have that set, we'll look at our overall assessments of the work and our health radars. Then we're going to do our PI planning events, and then we'll finish up by monitoring and tracking the delivery of that on the back end. So let's go ahead and get started. If you're not familiar with Targetprocess, on the left-hand side here, we have a series of views and reports and dashboards that we can use. If you want to add new ones, you can easily come down here and add any new views or reports or dashboards that you might want to have as well. So for this organization here, we're going to start by looking at our high-level solution. This is how we can organize the work. So showing you some examples of the different types of entities that we can support. We have a way to deploy all these solutions. So if you're not using one of them now, you can turn it off. We can always turn it on, or you can deploy it later using our solutions library, which allows you to easily set up and configure the various different updates and views that we might want to use. For the organization today that I'm going to be walking through, it's a banking organization, and they have a bank and an insurance branch that they're working on. So the way we've worked this out from a level standpoint is we've got our value streams. In this case, consumer loans has 3 different arts underneath there, and then the capital market security has 2 different arts underneath that. When we want to set our high-level goals, those strategic themes that we'll be sharing with the teams in our 2-day PI planning, here's where we'll be able to look at our key results, and all the work from the lower levels are going to roll up into that. That allows us to track progress overall and see how well we're doing from a goal perspective, and are we on track to hit our targets, or do we need to maybe adjust course and see what's going on from that perspective. When I open up the trains, we can drill down into the teams and see which teams and individual members are working on that, which really allows us to maximize the use of those teams. We'll show you some examples later where we can actually check the allocations of what's going on across those various different teams. And finally, again, we have our objective hierarchy here where we can break down that work down from a high-level objective to a strategic objective. And then if we're even using tactical objectives, it allows us to do nested types of objectives, and then really align the work from an epic capability, feature, or story level to these different levels of objectives. So now that we have all of that set, we want to know how we're doing overall as an organization. So these types of assessment metrics that come off the SAFE website from measuring how well we're doing from a business agility standpoint, a lead agile leadership standpoint, or a DevOps health standpoint, we can pull in this information, and then we can also add additional details if we want to from any type of a metric, agility charts, or other things that we want to go ahead and augment to this. This helps us know on a regular basis, whether that be quarterly or annually, how well we're doing and are we improving as an organization. Once we're ready to get started for our PI planning, we're going to start looking at it from a high-level perspective. So we'll talk about budgeting and how well we're doing in terms of the existing budgets that we have. Are we staying on track with the budgets? Are we over-allocated overall, or are we doing fairly well? We can also, look at that from the value stream perspective. We can look at it, break it down as from a solution perspective as well. So this allows us then to do things like track budgets over time and just make sure that we understand exactly what's needed to be spent as we drill down into the details for this specific group. We can have a Miro board integration as well, so we can integrate things like our portfolio canvases into this. So if we want to track our funding and our details at a high level, we can use Miro boards. We can track this information. We can interact with this board right inside of Targetprocess if we needed to, and then we can drill down further into that. This really allows us to set up our big portfolio epics that we want to go ahead and start to work on, so we can track all of that work. As I look at my portfolio roadmap, then this is an example of those portfolio epics, and we can see how well they're aligning at the highest levels. We can drill down further into that and see more details as we drill further down. One more discussion just around costing overall. So we can track overall how much it's costing us to do this work. This is average cost per point. So we can look at across the teams and see how much that's costing us. We can look at our portfolio epic costs and track our approved budget to our actual cost to our projected cost there. And then we can also roll all this up to a specific strategic theme. So as we look at the details for these themes, we can see how well we're doing on overall costs, cumulative costs, as from the time we started this specific goal or this specific theme to the today point, and we can track if we're on track or are we behind in terms of going over budget or over cost. So just a couple of ways that we can align that work then, so as we go into our PI planning event, it'll allow us to make sure that we're hitting all of the details that we want to go ahead and hit, so we can move forward with the best data possible. The next section we're going to cover is the Agile product delivery section. This is where we have our epics broken down into our capabilities, and then we're going to be able to track and manage the work there from a capability standpoint. So this specific backlog here is showing us how well we're doing overall. We can track how well we're doing from a testing perspective. We can manage how, if we're auditing the releases and the details of the work that we're working on, and allow us to track our various different customers and the different details around that. So just a nice solution dashboard to show us what's going on overall. We can also look at things on our PI roadmap and track our program increments. So in this case, we've got our PIs across the top, and these are the features that we're planning on delivering into that, and we can track the details of all of the features that we have planned, what we already delivered in PI 3, what we're currently delivering in PI 4, and what's coming up here in PI 5. So all that can be tracked in multiple different ways. Here's an example of our feature Kanban board, and making sure that as we're watching the work that's in flight, that we can manage and track all of that work together. Having all this information allows us then to go into our PI planning, and that's the next section that we're going to cover, which is really going to allow us to do things like make sure that we're ready to go, that we have our teams, and the teams can go ahead and do their breakouts, and then we'll finish up with a review. So in PI readiness, the first thing we want to do is make sure that we have our features all aligned. So in this case, we can look at the backlog of the features that we have. Here are the planned features. We can then look at the things that are either in funnel or that we need to add to this list. We calculate weighted shortest job first for you, so I can put specific scores and numbers in here, which will then allow me to decide how what kind of a weighted score do we have on this work. So in this case, we automatically calculate the 5.33 for this feature, and then when we sort by weighted shortest job first, we can decide if these are the features that we want to build into our next program increment. We can certainly drag them down and drop them into here. As we add features here or epics here, we can actually do a plan for that work. So we can look at the work that we have, and we can calculate a schedule for the work that's been planned. And when I look at the roadmap for that, that shows me what that specific plan would be if we go ahead and execute on it based on the amount of time that it takes us to do that work. I can also replan this work. If I come down here and I update, say, one of these values, and I don't assign that to a PI, when I recalculate my schedule, it'll go ahead and give me a different plan. So if we can use that then, if we want to apply that new forecast, we can apply that new forecast, which will then update all of the details here for this specific work. Tracking that work from a capacity standpoint is another thing that we can do a couple of different ways. So in this case, I've got my capacity for a specific PI, and we can see the work that we've built into this. If I want to select more work and bring it in this case from a feature perspective, I can select multiple features and drag them over and drop them into the next PI if we want to go ahead and do that. That'll add 175 points of work into that specific PI if we decide to drop them into there. That's one way to go ahead and do the high-level PI planning, and then when the teams get ready to assess the features that are in there, we'll go ahead and do that. Well, we're going to assess that in the next section here under the breakout. So first, we'll check out our PI backlog. So these are the individual teams, and again, we can see the features that we've gone ahead and just assigned to them using the planning module that we looked at. The teams can then break that down and go into PI planning, and they'll be able to break that work down and align that work here to the various different team iterations. So the teams are going to take those features, align them into the iterations, and then even start to build out the individual stories for that work. Once they do that, they'll be able to break that work into our team objectives, and then each team will go ahead and align the specific objectives to there. We can open up the details page for this objective, and we can see which features or user stories or bugs are going to align to help us drive the delivery of this specific objective. All right, that allows us to do the overall breakout. When we do have our risks, we'll go ahead and add them to our risk board here, which will allow us to roam those risks and move those along through the process. So as we want to go ahead and resolve, own, accept, or mitigate those specific risks, we can do that here on that risk board. Once the plan is all set, as we're looking at the overall view of that, we want to review it. So we'll look at our PI dashboard first for that. That's going to show us the overall high-level numbers, the overall objectives that we have for the specific PI, and then it'll allow us to look at a historical view as well. So predictability for our programs. Now, this predictability score comes from the fact that we can go in on these team objectives and have the business give us their business score. So the business said they think this is going to be a 7 points of value. So we can go ahead and add that right in here, and update the 7. Now, when the team delivers on this specific objective, we'll go back to the business and we'll say what was the actual score that we delivered, and they'll give us a 5, and that'll go ahead and recalculate the predictability score for us. We'll be able to tell how well those teams are doing from a predictability standpoint. We can track more details on the program board here and allow us to see where the individual teams on the left side and the sprints across the top have specific dependencies of work, and even where things are out of order. So in this case, we should be doing this feature first before we do this second feature. So if we want to, we can drag that over and we can move that over here to better align it, or if we wanted to, we could add new dependencies on this board here as well. So when I right click here, I can add a relation, which will allow me to add a dependency, say to this over here. We'll call that a specific dependency, and it'll draw the string automatically. So that's the program board view of that. The next thing we can do then is drill into our program risks. If we have specific program risks that we want to go ahead and address. Again, this is another example of the team looking at this view from that perspective. Once we have all of that set and we've reviewed all of the details in our program, now it's a time for us to go ahead and do our confidence voting. And we can do that right here on the PI itself. So we have a web page that allows you to go in and say which fist of 5 number that you think it is. If it's a 5, a 4, or a 3, we're good. But if it's a 2 or a 1, we want you to go ahead and put your comments in there, and then we'll be able to review those right in here. So as a remote person, this is a great way to go ahead and capture that information. It adds that measurement and that feedback right in here, and then we can even measure for you and show you once the data is tabulated and everyone's voted, what are the overall scores. So just a great way to go ahead and do that remote capture and the remote update of all of the work here. Just a couple more things we can look at. So from a team perspective, if you're a Scrum team, you might be using some sort of a Scrum dashboard, which will allow us to see burn downs, team velocity, and how well the teams are doing. We'll break that work down into the individual tasks, so you can track all of that work on your team task board, which will allow us to then virtually manage this, or we can manage it as a group. When we get together for our team Scrum, we'll come here, we'll go ahead and move the cards along, and you'll be able to see those cards move from open to in progress to planned to done. So it just allows us to easily track what's going on overall from the card movement perspective. If you're doing a Kanban view of that, you'll have your team Kanban board view. Again, this allows us to set the WIP limits that we need for this specific work, and then you can adjust the team Kanban, and you can flow the work across as you need to. The last thing that we're going to do from an inspect and adapt perspective is go into the retrospectives module here. We'll be able to look at the detailed work that we're tracking. From a retrospective perspective, we'll add our action items, and then teams can go ahead and create their feedback associated to that. We can track that on our feedback into action item board if we wanted to as well. So as we're going through what worked well, what didn't work well, what do we need to improve, we can add that onto this board, and then we can drive this work into action items that we can go ahead and create for those specific retrospectives. The last thing we're going to cover is really the final piece of this, and it's really automating the DevOps components of that. So as the teams do their code commits, and as they start to then do their builds and their merges and their deploys, we're able to track all of that work inside of here as well. So we have a container that allows us to capture the environment. How long did it take us to get that work through the various different environments by average or overall? So this is the past releases and how long it's taken us to get those releases out the door. We can look at how many releases we have over history. We can track our packages and the delivery there as well. The last thing that we're going to do is monitor that work. So as you do your deployments and you get those deployments out the door, we can monitor things like mean time to acknowledge an issue, if there was an incident that came out, mean time to recover on that incident, so we can track that. That will then allow us to see how many incidents we had, and then track our overall downtime. So that allows us to see the details there. If we're tracking our overall results as well, we can see things like a performance result or a value result for an environment or for a deployment, and we can measure and exactly see where we should be, where we expect to be, and where did we overperform on those. So that just closes the loop and allows us to see some additional delivery data from a DevOps perspective and track things from an end-to-end view. So let me go back up to the top here. We'll finish up where we started by looking at our remote PI planning mural board one more time. So what we really did was we went around this circle. We allowed us to see things from a high level view, from a value perspective and a vision perspective, break that work down to the program and the team level so the teams could do their work. We went ahead and looked at our overall continuous delivery pipelines and did our retrospectives on that work along with our voting, and then looked at things like our overall health and assessment radars to make sure that we're tracking all of the details there. All this can be done online. All this can be done using a tool like Targetprocess, as well as maybe some video software and some other pieces of that. So hopefully this gave you a good overall end-to-end flow of how that could work. If you have specific questions, you can email us at info@targetprocess.com. Thank you very much and have a great day.